Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome to Proper Madness, formerly Beautifully Broken. My name is Sabby, and I give a unique perspective on mental health by providing tools, guidance, and knowledge on how we can better understand ourselves, as well as our past and present experiences, and in doing so, we can help heal our mental health. I get to speak with a variety of individuals from around the world as they share their stories from their journey through their mental wellness so that it helps others stand strong and use their voice. Welcome back, everybody. My name is Sabby, and today I get to sit down and chat with Deborah Lee Smith, and I've known her on Instagram for a little while. She actually reached out to me a long time ago to be on her art show, and that's how we know each other.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I loved your contributions to the art show, and that's something that I intend to get into this year as well. So I will definitely reach out to you, and maybe we can do a little podcast episode for the art show.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So as you said, yeah, my name is Deborah Lee Smith. I'm an actor and a producer, writer, and a mental health advocate. And I am located in Los Angeles. And my mental health journey, kind of like really started in a overt and very specific way a few years ago. I went through a really horrible divorce, and with that, it just like really led me into a really dark pit of my life. And it was one of those things where I was, talking to a bunch of my friends, and I realized that even though I kind of had a reason for feeling really, really shitty and for being in this like depressed, just like really dark place, that other friends of mine were in similar headspaces, and that there doesn't necessarily need to be a reason for it. Like I had one friend in particular who I was talking to her, and she has a, wonderful career. She's also an actor and a writer, an amazing career. She had just gotten married, and like there was like everything in her life was going really, really well. And yet she was also suffering with some like really debilitating depression at that point. And it just kind of made me realize, that we're all going through stuff, whether there's a specific reason for it or not. And that I think that that's something that we don't talk about enough, is just the feelings of depression when there maybe isn't necessarily a reason for it. And so that's when I started my organization, More Than You See, which is what, you submitted to the art show.
Mm-hmm.
And with More Than You See, like our focus is really providing non-traditional mental health resources to the community. So focusing on, books, podcasts, TED Talks, other videos, songs, movies, like all of the things that are kind of just part of our everyday life, and looking at those things and thinking about how those things can actually help us through dark times. Like, of course, there's also the importance of therapy and medication if necessary, and, all those sorts of things, but there's not just like a one-stop shop when it comes to mental health. And so it's just been a really wonderful journey over the past couple years, like figuring out my own ways that I deal with things, and then also providing help and resources for other members of the community.
Yeah, I think it's really beautiful what you do, to be honest. I'm always like keeping up with everything that you post and everything you upload, and it resonates so much. And it's very inspiring too, because you're not only sharing your story and what you're going through, but other people as well. And those resources are really important, because I feel like a lot of people don't know that those are out there, which still sucks. And it's sad that it's still like that, but When you're going through your dark time in life, what was the turning point for you to say, okay, it's time for me to get some help and I need to talk to someone?
I mean, I was seeing a therapist at that point, but I still wasn't feeling like my life really had purpose. And I think for me, I have found that that's the most important thing to have in your life in order to fight through something,
Hmm.
is to have purpose. Um, and it doesn't necessarily need to be something profound or huge. It could be, I mean, like, for example, yesterday, actually, I just like had a really bad mental health day. Like,
Hmm.
I was just in a really not a good place. And I just felt, like you and I were talking about before we started recording, the fact that we're reaching like 1 year of being in quarantine in LA, and I miss my friends, and I'm tired of working as hard as I've been working this past year. I'm just exhausted, and I just like really hit a wall yesterday.
Yeah.
And I, because of my what I've learned about myself, I was I very purposefully created a goal for myself yesterday that I knew was going to be something that would make me feel better.
Hmm.
And so it basically like gave my entire day purpose in some way. So I decided, like, I looked for a picture on my phone, and I decided that when I finished my work yesterday that I was going to like drink wine and paint and
Hmm.
listen to Taylor Swift for the evening. And that's what I did. And it was like, and, but also like allow myself the feelings to still be there,
Yeah.
because like, even though that didn't, I mean, it did make me feel better in some sense, but I still felt really depressed and shitty.
Hmm.
But I was like, so I was like drinking wine, crying, painting, and listening to Taylor Swift. But it was like exactly what I needed.
Yeah.
And and so just like having that, having that goal for myself yesterday would just like made me, it also, I think like the thing that I've learned the most in therapy is the importance of not like obviously not ignoring your feelings, but sort of calling your feelings out and being like, okay, feeling, I see you. You're feeling really shitty today. I am going to give you your time to feel shitty. We're going to
Hmm.
sit in this together, and we're going to get through this to the other side.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that was the thing that really, for me, like that was the catalyst for me when I was going through my like really dark time, was that I was talking to a therapist. I mean, I was seeing her twice a week at that point. And to the point where it was like, to get through a couple days by myself before I saw her again was really hard. Like, it
Yeah.
was really hard for me to function without talking to her. Um so I had that, but it was walking my dog in the morning, and I started, because I still have to walk him. He still like he's very dependent on me.
Yeah.
And so I ended up just like walking my dog every morning, and I started listening to podcasts. And there was a couple podcasts that I listened to. I mean, especially because I'm an actor. So I was listening to actors talk about their own mental health struggles, and listening to someone else talk about how much they were suffering made me feel like I was not alone, and that like that for me was the catalyst.
Yeah.
And that also for me was like kind of the seed of what created More Than You See, because I was like, this is so amazing in the fact that I'm seeing a therapist twice a week, and she's incredible and she's really helping. But the thing that actually made me feel better was listening to a random podcast about
Yeah.
someone else telling their story.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was like the realization where I was like, okay, I need to like expand on this. Because we just don't know what's going to be the thing that's going to help us. And so that's why I try to provide a lot of different types of resources. Because again, like, I love podcasts. I have friends who hate podcasts. Like, they will not listen to a podcast, you know? So I think that it's just so important to provide like different mediums for different people.
Actually, I want to go back to when you said that you just sit in your feelings. I feel like that's so key and so important. And a lot of people just like to avoid, either through like distractions or overworking or drinking in a not healthy way. You know what I mean? Not how you did it. You did it in the best way possible. I think that's that's so smart. I've totally been there too.
Yeah.
Because I was sober for, oh God, like a year and a half before. And then I realized, I'm not an addict. I just had poor coping mechanisms.
Mm-hmm.
But now being like a more normal drinker, I will do that sometimes. I'm like, oh, okay, shit, here comes whatever this is.
Right.
I gotta just feel it.
Mm-hmm.
When you're feeling those feelings, what is it like for you? And that can be tough to describe, but a lot of people think it's really scary. But sometimes we need to go through those.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think I love the ocean. Like, the ocean is like my favorite place in the world. And I think for me, it feels like a wave. Like, it feels like a wave. And I mean, it was just something where, like, when I woke up yesterday, I woke up and I was like, oh, today's going to be a bad day. Like,
Yeah.
I could just tell. And it just felt like overwhelming, and just like a wave of sadness. And I think, number one, because of my work on my mental health, I know that was going to pull back and eventually, and like, the tide was going to go out, and I was going to get through it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was also one of those things where I was like, okay, this is where I'm going to be sitting today. Like, this is clearly what my feelings are going to be today. And I think that the most important thing is to kind of check in with yourself and be like, okay, so like, how do I want to experience these feelings today?
Yeah.
Because these feelings are going to be here. So how do I want to experience them? Am I going to experience them as sitting in bed all day and like eating a bunch of chocolate and watching movies? Is that how I want to experience it today? Or do I want to, I had a bunch of things on my work to-do list. Like, do I want to push through this work to-do list and, whatever. And that's what I decided to do. I was like, okay, I like, these feelings are going to be here no matter what. And I know that I am in a headspace that I can get some things accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what I'm going to do. And there's certainly days where that's not the case. Like, there's certainly days where I wake up and it's, and I feel that like depression or that sadness. And I'm like, nope, today is not going to be a productive day, And I think that it's so important to recognize that for ourselves, and to really, pay attention and to allow ourselves to feel that, feeling, and then to ask for help with, because like, this is why mental health days were created when it comes to work, like, and of course we have a long way to go when it comes to corporate culture and taking care of our mental health. But I think that it is so important to recognize it in yourself, and then to ask yourself how you want to experience it. Because I think, like, I've certainly, before I was so aware of my mental health, and before I was so aware of like my own feelings and stuff like that, I would have, probably weeks where I was feeling really sad, but I wasn't recognizing it as like okay, this is sadness and and depression, and why am I feeling this way? And kind of like really mining into it and looking at it more.
Yeah.
Previously, I would just be like, oh man, I feel shitty today. And then I would feel shitty the next day. And then I'd feel shitty the next. I would just feel that way for a longer time because I wasn't really mining what was going on there.
Yeah,
I
that's I
think
like to
that's, yeah,
yeah, I
sounds
like to
like
think,
that.
I describe it to people as like digging up fossils, like you don't know what you're gonna find.
Mhm,
You have no idea, but once you get there, you start picking up these little pieces, and then you can start piecing them back together.
for sure.
Um, Especially, I would say that's more with like trauma as well,
Mhm, yeah,
because with PTSD, you have memory gaps. So it's
right.
almost like you're digging, digging, digging. Going, oh, okay, here's this. This is why I feel this. Some of your, when you feel those emotions and you're going through some of your down days, is there ever a trigger that you find can set it off sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, yeah, I mean, yes, definitely. I mean, I think you are probably hard pressed to find someone who deals with depression who does not have trauma.
Hmm.
I think most people do.
Yeah.
Um and so I have found for myself that I have a very good relationship with my father now, but I
Hmm.
did not as a child, and there was a lot of not good things that happened when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And there's a I have a very intense fear of abandonment and never being good enough
Hmm.
that comes from that. And that directly relates to my marriage splitting up and the way that that was done, and the just the whole situation
Hmm.
triggered that for me in another, deep way. And I have found that it also was like years of our relationship was actually kind of picking at that trauma.
Mm.
And then and so now I recognize that anytime, like, I love being alone, like I love being single, I love that my time with my dog, like I love
Mhm.
all of that sort of stuff. But I also love being a partner to someone. And
Mhm.
so for me, I can pretty much always know that I get triggered when I'm feeling lonely or alone, or something along those lines. Pretty much always ties back to that.
Yeah. Well, that's funny you say that you have that deep-rooted fear of abandonment. I did too, actually, growing
Yeah.
up. My fear of abandonment comes also similarly from my father as well. Like now we're best friends.
Mhm.
Like he's like my number one fan. Like I get texts from him every day. Like literally, he will call me now every day, and I'm like, okay. But before we didn't like we didn't have that close relationship. But I found that it was because he had all this unresolved stuff. And as a parent, you're not given a handbook, unfortunately. And I think how I got through that fear of abandonment is also similar to you, just really enjoying being alone, enjoying my own time, being single, being by myself.
Mhm.
But I feel like that self-love journey is kind of turned into like toxic positivity a little bit. Like people are
Mhm.
like, "Oh yeah, love yourself, you're a bad bitch, whatever." But then they don't highlight, "Hey, you got to love yourself through the messy parts too."
Yeah.
You know?
I 100% agree with you. I think that there's a real like my ex-husband, I would say, is the poster child for toxic positivity.
Oh man.
and and so I think, I mean, my parents got divorced when I was 5.
Mhm.
That was part of my stuff, and it was a really messy divorce that I and the repercussions lasted until I went to college when I was 18. So
Mhm.
it was years of really just terrible stuff. And so but on the then, like, with my personal divorce, yeah, my ex-husband just didn't really have the emotions
Mm.
to, and he very much was just, I mean, going back to, me thinking before that I was just like, I would have weeks where I was feeling sad and depressed and whatever. And for him, his way of coping with that is just like, yeah, but just think your way through it. Just be positive, and just like, you don't have to feel this way. Like, just be happy. And it's like, that's not the way this works. It's not. And I
Yeah.
and I think that there's, like Joe Dispenza and Abraham Hicks and all of that, like the
Yeah.
stuff, which I very much think that there's a lot of truth and goodness in the idea of rewiring our brain and the ways that we can build more positive routines and that sort of stuff. But you still have to feel the negative feelings. You have
Hmm.
to.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where, just like working on, like, yeah, building proper routines for yourself, or proper habits that can help you through stuff,
Hmm.
is just so important.
Yeah. Yeah, the toxic positivity. I've definitely had partners in the past that have, like, if I was having a depressive day, they wouldn't understand how to handle it, and it'd be like, "Oh, think positive." I'm like, "No,
Mhm.
you gotta face this." But I found in what I'm learning slowly is people it's almost like we're a mirror with people. If whatever they're uncomfortable with, they try to kind of combat it in a complete opposite way. Like toxic positivity is like, well, you got to think about it. If someone just wants to be happy all the time, it's because they don't want to face what's inside,
Yep.
you know?
100%. That's exactly what it is that, like, they don't want to address their own negative feelings, so they just mask it with positivity and then try to, yeah, use that tactic on anyone else. And
Yeah.
yeah, that doesn't solve anything.
No, no, it does not. I really want to learn more about how you got into acting and producing. That like how did you get into it? Because I'm sure that's one of your passions. And when you do have a bad mental health day and you get to do something that you love, is it cathartic for you? Do you like it?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Like, the acting industry, of course, is so difficult because it's such a crapshoot. And
Hmm.
it's just something, like, to like talking about toxic positivity. I mean, that's an industry that's kind of built on that. Then the idea of, like, just keep swimming, like, you're going to succeed, everything's going to be okay. And it's just like, that's not, number one, that's not guaranteed. And it's yeah, there's I certainly have days where I, get auditions for things or whatever, and I'm just like, are you serious? I have to do this right now? Like, come on. But I know that if I had to be on set, then that would definitely put me in a good mood. But I think that relates to the fact that I'm also such an like, people person. Like, I just love being surrounded by people. So for me, a set is just like a family. And I think,
Mhm.
that's how I got into it. Was like, I went to a like private Jewish day school when I was a kid,
Mhm.
because the local school, I grew up in East LA, and the local school that I should have gone to was not in a good neighborhood. And my mom, yeah, went and talked to the principal about, like, enrolling me and my sister in elementary school. And they were like, this was like before Columbine, this was before,
Wow.
like, school shootings. And yet they had metal detectors, and like, all kids knew how to like, deal with guns on campus.
Mhm.
And my mom was like, yep, this is not really where I want my daughters to go to school. So she managed to get us on scholarship into a private day school. And so we did that. And so then when I went into junior high, I was, like, back in a public school. And I got like bullied pretty hard for being Jewish and just for not having gone to the same elementary school as everyone else. Like kids are just cruel. And
Yeah.
so the theater department was like the only like like the theater teacher was incredible, and like the theater kids kind of became my people in some way. And so that was kind of how I really got into it. And yeah, then I went to Berkeley for English Lit and Theater and got into it there, and then ended up coming down to LA right after I graduated. Had a very unpleasant experience with a casting director that made me think that I wasn't cut out to be an actor. And so I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll just be a producer because I want to still be involved in the industry.
Yeah.
And this was like several years after the economic crash, but it was still so hard to get a job as a producer. And so I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll go to school and get a like master's in producing. My mom's a teacher, so education for her is always number one above
Mhm.
everything else. And so then I decided to go to Australia to get my master's degree because it was way cheaper than anything in the US.
That is awesome. Wow. I've never heard of anyone that's done that. That must have been amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty crazy. I had a friend who had applied to a program in Australia, and that's how I kind of knew like about it being a thing. But yeah, I mean, it was so I went to school. I got a master's degree in 1 year for under $15,000, including my living expenses.
Wow.
And I wouldn't have been able to, that wouldn't have even covered food. Like, like it's so crazy what the, comparison. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, so I did that, and then I ended up meeting my ex-husband because he's Australian. And so then we ended up starting a construction company together, and I worked in construction for 4.5, 5 years, and then realized that I was really unhappy with my life and that that's not what I wanted to do. And so I moved back to LA in order to get into acting. And now I've been here like 7 years.
No, that's
So,
awesome.
yeah.
I like that. That's really cool.
Thanks.
Is the bullying part of some of your triggers as well? I can't imagine with acting. Like if you had been bullied in your childhood and then you're in the acting realm and people are just, from what I've heard, it's very critical and nitpicky and highly competitive.
Mm.
How do you cope with that? Just
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, honestly, I would say that actually my bigger hang up when it comes to acting is being vulnerable, because because I was bullied and because of all the stuff with my parents and like all of my experiences, I've built pretty strong walls against
yeah,
emotions and against people and feelings, and I just like really kind of live in a iron palace in some ways. And so for me it's been about learning how to take those walls down when necessary and with people that I trust, and that and for characters like that has been and since I've been in therapy and since I've gone through this divorce and all those sorts of things, I think my acting has certainly gotten better because I've just learned more how to be more vulnerable and how to
yeah,
take down those walls. It's interesting because the rejection, the constant rejection when it comes to acting, I actually think I'm actually really good at that.
yeah,
um I think because of those walls and because probably my own feelings of like not having enough self-worth. And so that's actually something I've talked with my therapist about quite a bit, is the fact that I'm really good at failing and I don't think I'm good at succeeding. I need to be better at succeeding than I am.
mhm,
Um and I think that that's something that we all yeah, some people are just really good at celebrating themselves and like taking those wins. And, like some people are
Yeah.
just like genuinely confident. I mean, some people's confidence is very fake, but some people are genuinely super confident people. And that is not me. I am learning how to get better at that.
Well, I mean, from an outside perspective, you seem very confident. Like low key, before I asked you to come on the podcast, I was like, I'm a little scared. She's like got it. She's like got it together. I don't
Oh my
know.
gosh.
I swear. So you come across as very confident, just so you know.
Well, thank you. Clearly, I need to post more stories about how I'm not feeling confident. No, I mean, I think that it's interesting. Like for my podcast, when I start interviewing people at some point, whenever I do that, I want to interview friends of mine who are like fairly well-known actors,
Yeah.
and because I think that there's a real skill in crafting a story when it comes to being a public facing figure.
Hmm.
But I think it's also really important to take that story down sometimes and just tell it how it is.
Yeah.
And so my podcast is going to be or when I interview people, it's going to be about actors that we know
Yeah.
being vulnerable and sharing what's actually going on, because I think that's really important.
Yeah, because I mean, when they're in the public eye, they're technically role models for other
Mhm.
people. And unfortunately, going back to the toxic positivity thing, they show their best face forward all the time. We seldom get to see what it's actually like to be in their lives every day and what they're going through. Um, Simply just because I mean, I don't know, I'm not in the acting realm, but in my opinion, I think it's just a lot of you have to put on a certain mask for that sort of industry. And I can't imagine how incredibly isolating and lonely that can be sometimes, that you can't fully be yourself or be authentic because of like publicity or how you're coming across or what have you. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I
yeah.
mean that's why I called my organization More Than You See, because I think that yeah, we all wear masks, like not just celebrities, but we all wear masks. And I think it's also like it's so important to still also be able to protect yourself,
Hmm.
and again, just like finding that balance, because I can, I certainly do craft somewhat of a story on my social media.
Hmm.
Um, but part of that is because I need to protect my own feelings
Hmm.
and leave some of my feelings just for me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, and I think that that's also something that changes as we age and as we learn about ourselves, and all of those sorts of things. Like all of that stuff is just important things to discover and
Hmm.
share if you want, but also just kind of keep it for yourself.
Yeah. I like that. What are some of your favorite things about More Than You See? What's something that you've really been excited about?
Great question. I mean, I really loved the art show last year. I
Mhm.
really did. And I created that because it was like May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and end of March last year was like when everything really shut down.
Mhm.
And I was again feeling like like life had no purpose. Like, what am I doing with my time? What is my, reason for existing?
Mhm.
And so I knew that I needed to give myself a project in order to like put my time and energy into something. And so that's kind of like the beginning of April. I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make this art thing. make an art show. And yeah, I mean, so I just like reached out to a ton of artists like you and was like, hey, do you want to, share your art that relates to mental health, like with the community? And again, I mean, we had most days we posted more than one like art piece. Like there
Yeah.
was so much incredible art that was shared on that. And I just really, it was just so wonderful
Yeah.
to have the community come together in that way. Um, and I am really excited about the future. Like I love like the podcast that I'm, doing now, is just short little like 15-ish minute episodes
Hmm.
where I just like talk about a topic and try and give people some resources or some ideas,
Yeah.
for like how they can, work through their own mental health and stuff like that. And like that has been going really well. And I'm just excited, to just continue to grow the community and the platform. And it's just fun to have something else that is like not really about me that I'm
Yeah.
able to like put attention into.
I think the 15-minute short ones are smart because, like, people could just, I mean, if they're driving somewhere, they're getting ready in the morning, they just put that on, they're listening to it, and it could just, whatever they're going through, could help them in that moment, So,
Mhm. Yeah, that's my hope. That's my goal. And I mean, like I certainly have podcasts that I list like episodes that I've listened to more than once because I know they're going to make me feel better.
mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of my focus with the podcast as well, is that way they're short. So if someone, they decide that they need to listen about um how hard COVID has been on relationships again, they can listen to it multiple times, like who
Yeah,
knows?
I like that.
I mean, I know that you mentioned this before we started recording, or maybe it was while we were recording about you being sober for a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just curious what, because I certainly have friends who are sober indefinitely or
Yeah.
like, and I'm curious what was the decision for you um to start drinking again in a conscious way,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, just what you learned about yourself through that.
I'll give you the the shorter version because I could talk about this for, I don't know, like a day. Okay, so in 2019, I finally got help for my depression, right? I had depression since I was 13, and I think
Mhm.
and it just wasn't going away, and I was tired of it. But anytime I would drink, but previous to me getting help, anytime I would drink, I would overdo it. I wouldn't be conscious of how much I was drinking. I'm a little person. I'm like 5'1", so I can't handle a lot. But I would always overdo it. And even if there were times that I didn't overdo it, I'd get highly, highly emotionally reactive and charged, and I'd push away a lot of people and destroy a lot of relationships
Mm,
and say silly things that I didn't necessarily mean just because I was in so much pain.
mm,
So when I first got help, I initially said, I remember I went to this place called Onsite in Nashville, and and they break you off into smaller groups, and you do like group therapy. And I remember my therapist asking me, "So you don't think that alcohol is is an issue for you?" I go, "No, I think I was just in a lot of pain and I overdrank. I don't think I'm an alcoholic."
mm,
And then I started going to codependency meetings because that was something that I had struggled with. And while I was there was another group that met at the same place, but like on Wednesdays instead of Tuesdays. And it was called like, Broken Wings meeting, but it was for addictions.
mm,
And I went, all right, I'm going to go check it out. Let's go see. And when I went there, I was hearing these stories that resonated with me so deeply that then automatically I assumed, okay, I must be an addict. I'm going
mm,
to go sober indefinitely. And so I started my sobriety journey, I want to say it was actually, I stopped drinking after July 4th of 2019 because I had tried to take my own life. And when I did, I was not sober. I was very, very inebriated. And so that was my reason at first. I went, all right, I'm going to stop drinking until I sort my stuff out. It wasn't that I thought I had a problem. But then when I went to a meeting, I was just kind of influenced by all these people and assumed, okay, because my story resonates with all these people, I must be an addict.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I started going to AA meetings, and I had I still talk to her, but the coolest sponsor in the world. So first of all, so hands off, like let me do my own thing stepwise, but also would dig deep. And I started going to AA meetings, and then I started quickly realizing that I didn't resonate with anything anymore. I go, what the heck's happening? I go, I'm like, I can't relate to anyone. And that was purely because I noticed, and this isn't to say that there's anything bad with it, but I noticed in the meetings that I was going to that everyone is very much still stuck in their past. And they weren't healing from anything. They were still living in that almost victim mindset. And I'm sitting there going, why are we talking about our pasts? Like, I know that I've been through all this stuff, but I want to heal from it and move forward. I know you have to look to heal, but I don't want to live there. And so I was surrounded by people who lived in their past. And I was like, I can't do this. I go, I don't think I'm an addict. Like, I had bottles of alcohol under my sink for months and didn't even touch it. Right. I'd go out with my friends. They'd be drinking. I didn't bat an eye. I didn't really care about it. And then I noticed that my drinking was a more peer pressure social thing to feel cool. And so that was another aspect of it. And so what kind of helped me come out of starting to drink in a more conscious way is I very quickly realized that and before I even talked to my sponsor, I very quickly realized, I go, I'm not an addict. I don't have addictive habits. I don't think I'm, I fit in this group. And I told my sponsor that, and she looked me in the eye. We grabbed lunch. She goes, honey, I've been waiting for you to figure this out for months. I go, excuse me? She goes, she's like, you are not an addict. You are not an alcoholic. You just had very bad coping mechanisms for your mental health and depression. She goes, it's because you were avoiding your emotions. And I went, oh shit, you're right. And so I figured it out first, went to her, and I was like, okay. So then I slowly started drinking in a more conscious way, and I noticed a vast difference in my behavior. I go, when I'm sad, I don't even want to touch anything. I'm just like, nope, I need to like feel my stuff. And I just very purposely, automatically now know that's not a good idea because I feel worse. And so now when I drink, it's very much like I stop at 1-2 drinks, like a normal drinker would drink. And I don't have an itch to drink more. And you know what I mean? So that's kind of how I came out of it. So I was like, at least in a safe environment with someone I felt comfortable with, to try. I was like, okay, let me try. And then if I'm not going to give myself a hard time if this just isn't for me. So I tried, and I was like, oh my God, I'm enjoying myself. I'm not being like overly emotional.
Good for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's I've never gone like completely sober, but that's definitely a realization that I've had. That I've talked to my therapist about as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially because I think there's also ideas around, like, I grew up in a like fairly like dry household. So I definitely thought that like even having one drink a day meant you were an alcoholic. And so it was about, talking to my therapist about, just like conscious decision making when it comes to alcohol, and it not being
shame. Almost, there's a shame behind it too.
There is,
yeah, especially if you grew up in a dry household. You're like, oh no, like, should I be doing this? And even actually recently, there's someone who I considered a best friend of mine, and just because and she had known me when I was like, not in a good place drinking, but I had forgiven myself and let those things go, asked for her forgiveness because I did the 12 steps.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a couple of drinks, I think it was about like 3 weeks ago with one of my other girlfriends.
Mm-hmm.
And she had called me to try to set me up with someone. And I go, no, sorry. Like, I'm sure he's a nice guy, just not my type. And just because I had 2 drinks, the amount of shame she made me feel through saying, I don't want to talk to you when you've been drinking. Click. And I went, that sucks. I go, that sucks to hear and feel. That made me feel a lot of shame. So I understand, it's like, there shouldn't be as much shame as there is. It's very black and white. There's no gray, unfortunately, sometimes with it.
Right.
And that's what I didn't like about what I had been through going to meetings. I go, this is very black and white. And I feel like there's some gray in this. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
yeah, totally. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, thank you for asking. Yeah, that's something I really want to touch on and highlight is I feel like, unfortunately, people are placed in boxes too early.
Mm-hmm.
And then once they're in that box, they assume that they should just live there.
Yeah.
And then that's it. And then you, at that point, lose your identity and you lose sight of your own voice and your own opinions and what you think is right. And then you don't trust yourself.
Right.
That was a lot of the stories that I heard in AA meetings. It's people just not trusting themselves.
Right.
All right. Well, okay. So the last question that I ask at the end of every podcast is, if there's anyone out there who resonates with what you've been through, what you've talked about, or your story, what would you say to them? What would be your advice?
Get to know yourself. I think that's the most important thing in this entire mental health journey, is the fact that you have to be your own mental health advocate and you have to be your own clinician and advocate and therapist and you really, we all need outside help, but it really, just the way you have to advocate for your physical health when you're like in a doctor's office, and you need to do the same with your mental health. And I think that starts with understanding yourself, and that takes a lot of time, and it's something that I think is a lifelong experience, but it's still really key to do that exploration.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that's beautiful. And it's so necessary, because if you don't get to know yourself, then you don't know what works. So,
Right.
Yeah. That's actually all I advocate on that's like my niche, is self-awareness and getting to know yourself and healing those wounds. So I think that's amazing advice. I think that's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for coming on. I loved this.
Yeah, no, me too. This was really great. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was so lovely to have this conversation with you and get to know you more as a person. So you can find my mental health podcast called More Than You See on Mondays, and you can find it on all podcasting platforms, Apple, Spotify, all of the things. And I also post it on YouTube. And then you can follow us on Instagram. It's just more_than_UC, and on Twitter. Yeah, I'm just really excited. We've got a lot of really fun stuff coming up. So I'm just excited to continue to build this community with lovely people like you. So
thank you. I'm so glad you came on, and hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Definitely, anytime.
Thank you so much for listening, and remember, you have to go through the eye of the storm to see the clear horizon ahead. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you next week.